Hey everyone, it's Alex, and today I'm here to do something I don't really ever do, and that's a book haul. With spring right around the corner, I figured what I could do this year especially is really dedicate myself to at least trying to only buy books seasonally. In my 2021 reading plans video, I did make a note how I only want to read 52 books this year, so I think by only restricting myself to buying books within like the beginning of each season, then I can really curate kind of what types of books I might want to read throughout the whole year. I will say with a few of these, they're actually some books that I've even had since like November, but I've never talked about on my channel yet. And then a couple of them that I actually got back in January, but I started but never picked up again. These are like all books I'll probably read within April and May, so they're not even ones that I'm going to be reading this month. So starting with those non-technically spring haul books, the first one I have here is Tokyo Ueno Station by Marie. I think this is about a man who's died and his ghost is kind of lingering at this station. And I think throughout this time or period of reflection that he starts thinking about his life, and I think maybe even other settings of Japan. And what made me think of this book again is because I just finished a true novel by Manai Mizumura, which I really loved, and it talked a lot about the settings within Japan as well. And this book actually won the National Book Award, which you can see there, for translated fiction. So I've heard about this before, but that's what really encouraged me to kind of be more curious and pick it up, and it is pretty small, so I'm sure I'll get through it pretty quickly. Another book from January is Parakeet by Marie-Helene Bertino. I know that this one is a booktube favorite with Matthew Sharapa and also CJ at CJ Reads, so that's already sold me enough on picking this up. I think this is about a woman who's getting married, but I think she's not getting married anymore because she realizes that this parakeet is actually her, like a reincarnation of her grandmother. I heard that this book might be a bit absurdist, which is usually not fiction that I lean toward, but I think this is just like enough of maybe a palate cleanser of where I could maybe read it within April and May, and really kind of, I think I'll like it, so we'll see. So these next couple of books are ones from like way back when in November, and this is a short story collection, and it's called Fight No More by Lydia. I don't know if it's Millet or Millet. This is a book I've had my eye on for a really long time, but I had read an excerpt from this, I think, somewhere online a couple of years ago, and I really loved it. So I finally got the collection, and I heard that this follows a main central character, and that there are other characters in here just talking about that central character. I know this author also came out with a new novel this year, and I've heard it's been getting like mixed reviews, so hopefully the short story collection is better. And this last one from November, this is a writer I've heard so much about, but this is his seasonal collection, so I'm starting with spring because I heard it's the best one. But from what I've heard from Karl Knausgaard is that it's with his My Struggle series. I think there's like 5 of them, and I first heard about him based on Alex at Big Al Books channel, and Alex is great. She's such a diverse reader, and so I know she really liked the My Struggle series, so I don't know what she thinks about the seasonal project, but I figured if I liked, you know, the seasonal quartet from Ellie Smith, maybe I'll like this too, so I'm looking forward to this one. Alright, so now getting to like the actual springy book stuff of what I got recently, there are 2 here from the Women's Prize for Fiction that was just announced, so I'm really looking forward to these. But the first one I have here is Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. I've actually had my eye on this one for a while, even though it doesn't really sound like a story that's like immediately maybe like an Alex book, because this is about a character named Piranesi, and I think he lives in this house that's like a labyrinth, and it has a bit of mystery, and I think Piranesi meets like this guy every once in a while to just talk. It's a bit maybe possibly like fantastical, which really isn't my vibe since, you know, I like to read about old married couples that are just waiting to divorce each other. But I also heard about this book from I don't know what we are, I heard about this book from someone in my personal life as a recommendation, and I heard it's good to go in completely blind, so I'll try not to like be too curious about this one, but I think between myself and Ben at Doom Antidote, I think we plan to buddy read this one, so I think that'll be even more enjoyable with Ben along as well. And then up next I have Detransition Baby by Tori Peters, and I think out of all the books I'm talking about today, that this one is probably the one I'm looking forward to the most. I think this book tells the story of 3 women, and one of the women happens to be transgender, but amidst that, I think the transgender woman is dating one of the other 3 women, but now the transgender woman is detransitioning, which causes a bit of a kerfuffle. I've never used that word in my real life before. So it sounds messy and like probably a lot of internal deep thinking and like some young adult malaise, which I love. But what really sold me on this book is that Sean at Sean the Book Maniac recently reviewed this and he really loved it. So, you know, Sean being the Empress of Bailing, if he really loved this, then I'm really curious too. So I think I'll really like this one. Up next, I have My Year Abroad by Chang-Rae Lee. This one is a bit of a chunkster. So having, again, just recently read a big chunkster, I'm kind of looking for that same experience, but maybe just through one of or at least a contemporary new release. It's like about a mentorship between this man and a younger man, and then they go abroad, I think to China. But what really pulled me in is based on this idea of a Asian American inhabiting America, but now it's kind of flipped on its head to where it's an American inhabiting Asia. And so kind of that cultural connection between a bunch of hijinks apparently between the two, and just what sounds like a fun ride. So I'm really looking forward to reading this. I think I'll have a bit of levity, like what I was looking for maybe with something like Black Buck that I read last month. But maybe this one for me will have a bit more of that hybrid of thematic quality, and also, from what I've heard, Chang-Rae Lee having really good and interesting writing. So I'll be curious what I make of this one. Up next, I have a release from last year, but it just came out in paperback, and so this was a conscious pick of me waiting until the paperback came out. So fitting in with, again, stories maybe about the Asian American experience, possibly like My Year Abroad. This is Days of a Distraction by Alexandra Chang, and it tells a story of this young woman, I think in her early 20s, and she works in tech in Silicon Valley. Amidst all that, she also has this boyfriend who I think is white, and she's Asian herself. So I think supposedly the book is about like that feeling of conformity that many Asian Americans have, but based on just this central relationship and what it feels like to have to explain yourself through the Asian American experience constantly, which is something I feel familiar with myself. So I think I'll really like this one. It seems like a really innocent, harmless kind of story with just a bunch of like young 20-something thinking, which is usually a book I'm always in the mood for. So now we're moving on to some of the books where I've read this author before, or their works before, and so I have Cool for America by Andrew Martin. I read Andrew Martin's early work, which is the name of his novel from a few years ago, and it was one of my favorite books from 2019, and I feel like it went a bit under the radar, which truthfully I think makes sense because the novel itself I don't think was anything like groundbreaking, but I really love Andrew Martin's writing style. I think he really understands like dry, deadpan humor whenever it's like a whole satire on like the white American man. So I figured if I loved the novel, then I feel like this short story collection might just be an expansion of feeling like the novel, but just through these little spurts of different stories that have that same effect on me. And this is actually the final fiction book I have, and that is Rest and Be Thankful by Emma Glass. I know that Emma Glass came out with a book called Peach a few years ago, and I heard some mixed things about it, but what's really made me curious about Emma Glass is that she seems to be a writer that is like an all or nothing writer, at least in terms of themes. I think she really takes those chances based on what I've heard about Peach and kind of its symbolism. So I think it might be the same thing here. Apparently about a woman that's a nurse, and I think she's like hallucinating or like blurring the line between reality and her dreams or something. She's in an unhappy relationship too, so that's extra baggage, but I'll be curious about whether or not Emma Glass might be sort of just the talk of the town for me with what I've heard about Peach, or if she really might be like a writer with some unique staying power for me with this one. Alright, so we have the final 3 here, and these are all nonfiction. So again, with me only wanting to read 52 books this year, I do want to be mindful of trying to, it probably won't be half and half, but at least try to make up the bulk of also reading some nonfiction this year. So up first, I have We Were 8 Years in Power by Ta-Nehisi Coates, or Ta-Nehisi Coates. I've heard both, so apologies with my name pronunciation. I read Between the World and Me which was like a little nonfiction letter to Coates' son that Coates wrote, which I found really powerful and moving. So with these essays in here, I think I'll really love them too. But also it'll be a way of keeping me informed about the Black experience, primarily in America, and how that can really inform me more on this perspective. So I'm really looking forward to this one. Up next, I have another nonfiction work from an author I've read before, but it was his fiction. And this is Who Killed My Father by Edouard Louis. I read The End of Eddie by Edouard Louis last year, and I really like Edouard Louis' writing, but the story itself, where I knew going in it was so autobiographical that I couldn't really concentrate on how Louis would try to blend fiction when I just wish he wrote it as a memoir. But reading that book really sent me like in a tailspin of watching a bunch of Edouard Louis interviews, and I just love how he talks about writing and about his life mixed in with writing, and he's also really nice to look at. But with this book, it's primarily about Edouard Louis' father, who he would often talk a lot about in his interviews based on his conception of masculinity, and particularly with like French culture, I think. I don't mean to be like encompassing when I say that. I know Edouard Louis is really fixated on talking about things like masculinity, but also really about class and how class works within his work. So this is really short, but I've heard it's really like powerful and moving. So I think I'll really like this one because I've really wanted to read Louis' nonfiction. And the final book for today, kind of on a like maybe more happier note in a way, is So You've Been Publicly Shamed by Jon Ronson. This was a really popular book like some years ago, and it's just a collection of essays that I think will be nice to flip through about these people who have been publicly shamed and how we can kind of orbit around that concept even more now, since social media has even grown like way more than I think back in 2015 when this book was released. So I think these essays in here are bound to talk about a lot about like the internet and stuff like that, and our cultural connection and how we link that to like a sense of humor based on public shamings. So I think it's just a really fascinating concept. As someone who's been personally publicly not shamed, but I've just been like, I've had many unfortunate public embarrassing moments that, like Kelsey, if you're watching this, you could probably think of so many. So I think I'll find like a kinship with this book, and I think I'll really like it. So I'm looking forward to this one. And those are all of my books. Yeah, those are all of my books that I have here. So what I would really like to know is that based on all these books I talked about, because again, I probably won't be starting them at all until April and May, so I would really love to know which ones I should prioritize first. And if there was anything missing from this book haul that you might have thought that I was bound to show here, then please let me know what books you think I should pick up as well. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.